it was spotty, big puffy clouds that day, and on the airplanes they have a signal that comes out so that the gunners on the ships, or the ships, not the gunners, but the radio control people and the radar control people can know if it's a friendly ship or not. Sometimes the airplane IF, or identification thing, got shot out or wasn't working, and a plane would come in without that. And as our fighter planes were returning, a Jap plane came in. Of course, he had no signal, and so he wasn't identified as a Jap plane, and so it wasn't noticed, but he was following our fighter planes in. In the meantime, down below, I was all suited up with everything that my emergency rescue gear and survival gear, and I started down from the ready room down to the hangar deck where my plane was located. I usually went down ahead of time to check on my plane and see how the things were going. And I started down the ladder stairs down to the hangar deck, and I was told to stop and go back.
Was it a voice, or was it
a voice in my head? I would have swore it was outside, but it must have been in my head.
It was inside your head.
I stopped, and I couldn't figure out how come I'd ought to do that. I'm all ready, got my gun, my knife, everything that I need. I'm ready to go. But I went back and unlocked the hatch and stepped inside the ready room. The other guys were in there waiting for the fighter planes to land, and I thought, what am I doing here? I'm all ready. There's no use of me standing here. So I opened up and started back down the steps again to the ladder. And again, I was told to stop. And I couldn't, no reason for me to stop. And then it felt like I was stopped. And then about that time, the 40mm guns started firing, the anti-aircraft guns. We had quite a number of them along the sides of the ship, in different locations. 40mm were made in Switzerland, they're Bofors. They were in sets of 4 guns on a table thing. And they would go boom, 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 boom. And then they were shooting quite a ways away. And I turned around and started for the catwalk outside of the ship. It'd be back up by the hangar deck, or not the hangar deck, back where the ready room was. There was a hatch there you could do outside, a double curtain, so light wouldn't show out at night. And I started back up the stairs, and then the 20mm guns went off. 20mm guns are when something's very close, within a mile or so, and you need to knock it down. And they started firing, and then I knew something is, probably a Jap plane is either right out close or not. And I started up and was about to the hatch going outside, and there was a thud, and the ship shook a bit. And I kept going, and as I went out onto the catwalk, then there was some pieces of plank flying out in the air, and I saw one sailor going this way. And then I knew we'd been hit. A bomb Jap plane that came in, I dropped a 500-pound bomb, and it came in and went through the flight deck, through the hangar deck, down into the galley, down below, and exploded. Oh. And that knocked out the damage control center of the ship, or that was all controlled. And as it went through a torpedo plane's wings, it released the gasoline that was there to go out on the hangar deck, flow down the hole, and start fires down below. So we had a big fire on the hangar deck, and down below was fire. We were on, and anyway, then the smoke started getting real bad. And I had gone back and told the guys in the ready room that we were hit. They started coming out too, and we got out on the catwalk outside, and pretty soon the smoke was really bad. And Chuck and I decided we would go forward of the front part of the airplane carrier, because we were still going forward in the water. The screws were still churning, and we had been going about 30 miles an hour with the battle group, and so it had several miles to go before it coasted to a stop. And we started for the front part of the ship, but it got so smoky we couldn't see anymore. Couldn't see where we were at, really thick. So we turned around and felt our way back to the opening and decided we'd go over to the other side of the ship. There was a catwalk across the back of the flight deck up above. Down below is where a lot of bombs and torpedoes and stuff were stored, and after magazine. And so we started across on the catwalk, and there was fire down on the hangar deck, and all of a sudden there was a puffy explosion down there, and there was a ball of fire came up towards us. I was behind Chuck. We were scooped down trying to get below the smoke level, and it went up like this. I didn't get hit, but burned Chuck's hair and burned his face and his hands. But I didn't get burned.
You didn't get burned at all. Oh.
And then we turned around and came back, and I lost track of Chuck then. I didn't know where he went. But I went back, and then I went down the back ladder, down past the shower rooms, down a couple of decks to the opening on the back of the aft part of the ship. There was a 5-inch gun mounted back there in emergency. And that was on the fantail, and I went back there. And by that time, the order had been given to all unnecessary personnel to abandon ship. Otherwise, we'd just get in the way of everything, and we couldn't see where we were going, most of them. And so sailors were dropping into the water and diving off or jumping off the flight deck and hangar deck. And I was down there. It was still fairly clear that low below and behind the ship. And so I went over, and there were some rungs welded on the back of the ship that went part way down to the water, and so I went down them, or as far as the steps went, and then I dropped into the water and turned 90 degrees from the ship and swam away so I wouldn't get pulled under by the turning undertow there. And so there I was in the water, and there was it went. My ship was still moving through the water, and the smoke boiling out of it. Of course, you don't worry about what you're going to do then. You got 100 and some miles to swim to the Philippines, or 7,000 to go home.
Oh,
And
what an experience.
anyway,
You're out there for
the ship kept burning. They couldn't get the fire out. They sent in a ship to help try and fight the fire, and it got its radar screen up on the top, and stuff caught onto the flight deck and bent stuff out of shape. They had to pull out away from it because they were getting damaged, and they sent in the destroyer Birmingham to pull in on the other side of the ship to help fight fire. And they were right up close, practically nose to nose or side to side to the Princeton, and they thought they had at last succeeded in getting all the fire out. The unnecessary firefighting crews from the Birmingham were all sitting out and standing out watching it burn, and the ship was right alongside the Princeton. And the after magazine that I mentioned before back by the back of the hangar deck exploded. A little fire got back there, and it blew the back end of the ship off.
Oh.
And the shrapnel killed over 100 kids on the Birmingham who were watching with shrapnel coming through. Lots of them wounded.
Yeah.
A number of the ones that were still on the Princeton were killed. Of the firefighting crews are wounded.
Tremendous.
Oh yeah, it was terrible.
You're sitting out there in the water.
I'm out in the water.
Unbelievable.
Well, I was out swimming, and of course, at that time I was a good swimmer and in good physical condition, so I wasn't worried about swimming. I had a Mayweather vest. When I got in the water, I pulled the one side didn't work, but the other side did. But it was floating. There was a tube I could have unscrewed and loosened, but I didn't need it at that time. I was swimming away from it, and it was on down the way, and you go up in the air, and then you see a ways, and then you go down in a swell, and you don't see anything. I went down in the swell, and on the other side of the swell, I saw my home in Blackfoot. Just as plain as could be. I knew then I'd get home okay. I'd be all right. So,
what a testimony, brother. You knew that the Lord had spoken and wanted you out of that spot?
I later knew why, but right then I didn't. Anyway, so I kept swimming, and in a little bit I ran across a black kid hanging on to a piece of drift something. Wasn't holding him up very high in the water, but he had a hold of something. He wasn't sinking, and he was yelling and screaming and crying that he couldn't swim. So I swam over to him and did the old scout swim thing that I had learned in seen in a scout book. I'd never practiced before. You turn around and get your arm under, so they can't get a hold of you. If they get a hold of you, they'll try to climb up on you, and you'll go down and they'll kill you. So I swung him around and hooked onto him, and he was still wiggling, and I was trying to calm him down. And I said, "If you try to sink me under, I'll kill you." I had my .38 right here, loaded. I could have done it. And I suppose if he had tried to pull me under, I would have done it.
Wow. Wow.
It didn't occur to me that it was right or wrong. I would have just killed him if I'd have done it.
Unbelievable.
But I didn't. I pulled my .38 out. Let it go.
Let it go.
So then I kept swimming. And then I saw a cork raft with a bunch of people hanging onto it. When I was up in one of the top parts of the swell, cork raft is a big cork thing wrapped with canvas, and it has a netting across the bottom. And you can put dozens of fellows hanging on the sides, or some of them on the inside. And there are lots of fellows hanging on the sides and some inside. So I swam over to the cork raft, turned the skid over to someone to hook him on the raft, and I figured there's enough fellows in the raft, they don't need one more, and I can swim all right. So I took off swimming again. Where do I go? I don't know. I was just swimming. And then a little ways off, when one of the time's up, I saw one of the whale boats, or captain's gigs, coming in through the water, picking up sailors. It came from the Princeton. Not from the Princeton, but the destroyer Gatling. And it was picking up sailors out of the water and loading them in, and it was coming in my direction, so I swam towards it. When it got to me, they reached down and pulled me over. When they got their boat loaded, we went back to the Gatling, and they had a netting over the side, landing net, and so we climbed up the netting, and the fellows pulled you on board. And so I was out of the water then and safe. And I was on the Gatling, and they the person in charge decided that Birmingham had been badly damaged, and they had to pull back, and the man in charge decided to sink the Princeton rather than leave it as a token for the Japs to claim. So they sent the Irwin cruiser in to torpedo it, and the first torpedo went zipping through the top of the water. It didn't run right. It should have been under the water, but it's going through the top. Before it got to the Princeton, it made a U-turn and turned around and started coming back toward the ships.
Oh,
Boy, you should have seen
that's
all
unbelievable.
the destroyers, cruisers, full speed ahead, with a big rooster tail out behind them, gun in the water. Fortunately, didn't hit anybody on the way back.
Unbelievable story.
Then they fired again, and this one went true and right, and it hit the front magazine, and a big explosion, and black clouds went up. When the black clouds drifted up, there was nothing there. Princeton was gone.
Unbelievable experience. I can see now why